ज्ञानतिमिरन्दस्य ज्ञानन्दनशलाकया चक्षुरुन्मिलितं येन तस्मै श्रीगुरवे नमः। वञ्चकल्पतरुभ्यश्च कृपासिन्धुभ्येव च पतितनं पावनेभ्यो वैष्णवेभ्यो नमो नमः। Hare Krishna. So today's subject is trance. Trance and meditative absorption. Maybe you can take a moment to contemplate. How common do you think trance is? Are we always in trance, or is it only for the select few yogis or those with a neurological condition? How common is trance? What's your thoughts?
It's more common than we think.
More common than we think?
Yes.
Yeah?
How do you define that?
The word trance it's got a French root and it's also got a Latin root. The Latin root means to cross, to pass over, to go into another phase or state of consciousness, or also altering your brain state, which another kind of consciousness that's different to your daily waking state of consciousness. So my proposition is that the human being craves for trance constantly, and trance has actually shaped societies, nations, religions, and continues to shape the world. If one studies anthropology, every single culture has some kind of trance-inducing ritual. So trance has been a central component for eons, all throughout the history of mankind. What do you think is some very common ways we enter into trance in modern times? Any suggestions? Dancing, yes. Sleep, perhaps. Intoxication, drugs. There's a very, very common way, and we all do it every day. What do you think that is? Chanting and playing instruments, yes, that's a very more sattvic or nirguna way.
Every time we are like in intense concentration, we are in kind of trance. So also driving, we can be in trance.
Every time we're focusing is a kind of trance, you're saying. When we're driving, that's a kind of trance. Eating, the eating trance.
Doing something good in life. Doing something good.
Doing something good, that could be a kind of trance. Making art, yes. Meditation, yes, for sure. Even if you're not a yogi, so many people in the world are going into trance every day in their cell phone, because this is a kind of trance, yeah? The television is a kind of trance. Watching the news is a kind of trance. Your political views are a kind of trance. Your world views are a kind of trance. Your education system is a kind of trance. The whole world is shaped by trance. So the question comes, are we ever not in trance? You know, and we strive for trance, and we will gladly hand over our hard-earned money to go into trance, to pay a large amount of money to go to a rock concert, to go to the movies. This is a kind of trance. Have you ever been in a concert and the whole crowd just goes into a frenzy of some supposed people who have got talent and they are worshipping them like gods? This is a trance. Or even if they've left their bodies, then they still have t-shirts and so many posters in their room of passed over musicians worshipping them like gods. This is trance. Being in nature, that can also induce a kind of trance by the water. In the Greek histories, perhaps you've heard of Orpheus, and he was a half man, half immortal personality, and he used to compose very nice poetry, and he used to play on a lyre like a harp. And he was about to get married to his beloved, but she took the wrong step and she fell off a cliff and fell to her death. So, very sad situation. So then she went down to Hades, into the underworld, and Orpheus, he was so distraught from not being able to be united with his lover. So he ended up going down into the underworld, which usually for people on the surface they couldn't do so easily. But he would play his music so beautifully that the boatman took him down into the underworld, and he got all the way down into the underworld, and he met with Hades and he met with his beloved. And then Hades, he played some music for Hades, and Hades was so moved by this that he said, okay, all right, I'll let her go back to the surface. But one condition, she will follow behind you and you can't look back as she follows. You have to go all the way out of the underworld, but you can't turn around once to look at her. So they were walking for a long time. And then there's a couple of different versions here. One, he had just got to the doorway of the underworld and he was just about to step out, and he couldn't hold his excitement any longer, and he turned around and he looked at his beloved, and then she fell back down into the underworld, never to be released again. And the other version is they actually stepped out of the underworld, and then for some reason she still fell back down. So anyway, after this he was very, very distraught, but having such poetic and musical abilities, he composed such moving and beautiful poetry, and even the trees, they would weep hearing his poetry, the separation mood of his beloved. And earlier in his life, he was composing poetry to so many different things, to trees. He's got a whole lot of poetry just on oak trees, on rocks, on rivers, so many things. And then also on celestial nymphs, he would compose poetry, but towards the end of his life, he only composed poetry to the god Apollo. And then some nymphs, they became quite upset about this, so they ended up killing him and chopping him into pieces, and then they threw him into a river. But as he went into the river, his head was floating on the surface of the river, and he was still composing poetry, and the harp was still playing. So in the Greek histories, the sound of running water, the sound of the waves breaking on the ocean, this is the sound of Orpheus's poetry. So next time you sit by the ocean or you sit by the water, hear the poetry of Orpheus still singing today, because he's poetry personified in the Greek traditions. So nature can be a kind of trance. There's a bit of a side story there. Military, police, these are all trances. Military, very, very heavy kind of trance in the military. Athletes, also going for long hikes in nature, physical exhaustion. One of my first conscious trance experiences was going for long walks in nature with very heavy load on my back. And then I used to say to myself, just put the mind and the body in neutral and you just walk. I didn't have a vocabulary for it at the time, but that was because I was going into a kind of trance. So if you look at our Paleolithic man, hunter-gatherer cultures, they very much have a predisposition to go into trance because they are perhaps going for prolonged periods without water, without food, and a lot of physical exhaustion. So in that kind of state, then you're out of your daily waking state of consciousness and you're into another frame of mind. And in like the First Nation traditions in the Americas, they do vision quests where they'll go to the desert or they'll go to some place in nature for many days, fasting, no water, no food, to go into a kind of trance. So trance is very central. And if you look at, dare I say, all the religions of the world, they've been founded by some personalities' experience in trance. And then from there, from their mystical experience, somehow or other, some institution arises, usually a few hundred years after they've gone, with a whole lot of rules that maybe had nothing to do with the actual mystical experience whatsoever. But the commonality here is that most spiritual paths are all founded by some great personality's revelation that they've had in trance. And since we're here in Goa, psych trance, the music, it actually was founded here in Goa. So that's another kind of trance. So there's different techniques to get into trance, like perhaps more shamanistic techniques as the beating of a drum, or maybe dancing around a fire, a particular movement for many days, and that physical activity. If you look at the word trance, then you look at the word mantra. Mantra, triate, that which delivers, trance. Some other English words that start with transcend, traverse, travel, so it's crossing a threshold. Trance allows your consciousness to cross a threshold into another way of interacting with reality. So different people can get into states of trance through different ways, and for many people, at least born in Western societies, their first prominent experiences of trance is with music, maybe at the nightclub or some doof party or something like this, and then they can maybe stay in that scene for many years because they actually like the experience of going into trance, and because they are with a group of people who are also having a similar experience, and then a certain kind of culture forms in that space, and it's all about love and free love and all this kind of thing, and there's nothing necessarily wrong with that, but they have a commonality of all being trance addicts, if you like. And in that space of trance, often our heart opens more, and the way we look at reality is far different to our conditioned state. And also when you're dancing, your temporal lobe, your hippocampus, and your amygdala all get stimulated. So different areas of the brain, you're working on them when you're going into trance states. And so I was doing some research on trance last night, and I came across an article written by an Israeli guy about psych trance parties in Israel. And perhaps you know, in Israel, all young people, they are conscripted 2 years military service, compulsory military service. And often at the end of their military service, then many will travel to places like India, come to Goa, or they have huge trance parties in Israel. And this article is describing that these trance parties, they're like a pressure release valve of being in a kind of military state of consciousness, and this builds up a kind of tension in the field of the consciousness, and then going into the states of trance and psych trance, it helps relieve some of that bent up tension in the space of the chitta. And sometimes when people go into trance, particularly if it's induced by certain kinds of drugs or intoxicants, many suppressed samskaras for the first time in their life come to the surface because this is their first experience of trance. And so that can have either positive or negative effects.
Thank you.
A pressure cooker and Goa.
Should ask them to put that on just at that time.
Yeah. So chitta is the psychological body, the mind space. You can say the container of the mind, just in a simple way. It contains ego, mind, intelligence, and you can say the individual container for the mind, intelligence, and ego is the chitta, or the psychological body, the subtle body. So there's different ways that people, since the dawn of time, have accessed trance, and in a more indigenous setting, then these regular trance rituals were to commune with higher levels of consciousness, and very much had a spiritual purpose. And we can see for so many generations in all kinds of societies around the world, there was all kinds of trance rituals. And actually, sometimes when we think of ancient Greece, we think of this as like the start of rationale, logic, and that kind of thing. But actually, Socrates, he spoke a lot about trance, and also Plato and even Aristotle. Plato's Symposium has a whole lot of conversation about going into trance, and even Aristotle. So this was very much vital, is to go into trance. So if you're dancing to a particular beat, particularly when that beat is repetitive, monotonous, and rhythmic, then that induces trance, like the beating of a shaman's drum. So we can see that so much, all actual traditional music around the world was to induce trance and had a spiritual orientation, and would serve to connect to a higher plane of consciousness where spiritual communion could happen. So this is the origin of music and trance.
All music?
All traditional music, not the modern pop Britney Spears kind of stuff.
Okay.
But even that modern pop Britney Spears, that's also a kind of trance, because they follow a formula, about 3.5 minutes, and then it builds up, maybe 2-3 choruses. There's a prescription for the general mainstream composition of music, and so that's to get you in a particular kind of trance. And it's usually singing about the same thing over and over again in a particular kind of catchy beat, and it's infused with materialistic consciousness. That's also a kind of trance. So all music is trance inducive. Rap music, all these kinds of things, it's very much trance music. But some trances are more tamasic, some are more rajasic, and some are more sattvic, and some are nirgun. But one commonality in trance, particularly in the more sattvic styles, is that the small self disappears. And when that small self disappears into something larger, this brings a kind of bliss. So even people who are going to the nightclub and they're taking so much intoxicants and they're dancing to the duf duf, they become addicted to that because it gives them some kind of quasi experience of the dissolving of the ego into a larger space. And maybe that's the only way that they know how to access any kind of state like that, and maybe they think they can only also do that with alcohol or drugs, and so then they get stuck in that habitual lifestyle maybe for many, many, many years, and then over time the effects of the drug and intoxicants take the toll on the gross and subtle body. But it's the commonality of going into trance that's what's really driving them. And also in these states of trance, human beings will go to all kinds of great lengths to go into trance. They'll walk over hot coals in Malaysia. They'll put hooks and arrows and all kinds of things through their body. People will go through all kinds of austere activities to go into trance. So human beings crave for trance. We can't get away from it. And you just see how often you reach for your phone every day. This is a kind of trance, and you get sucked into this portal. That's why Mark Zuckerberg's creating the metaverse, because he knows, these people know very well, the human consciousness craves trance. It's craving to get beyond just the limited confines of our daily experience. And when we're connecting in sattvic or nirgun states of trance, then there's a knowing quality there, there's an experience of knowership, wisdom, insights, deep states of revelation of truth that are unplumbed by conventional understanding, because you're transcending some of the limitations of your limited mind-body complex, and depending upon the technique upon which you're inducing that trance, then deeper and deeper states of revelation will become available to you. So there's been a whole lot of studies done about measuring brain activity in states of trance. So as I mentioned, there's more sattvic styles of trance, and then there's more tamasic styles like cell phone, television. This is another very powerful trance inducer. Like even just after a few seconds of watching television, your whole brain pattern and cycles start to change. Very, very hypnotic. And so, over time of binge watching television, it harms your health in so many ways, not just psychologically, but that psychological effects keeps you in the grip of watching the television, then you stay on the couch. Next thing you know, you're eating frozen food from the freezer, and then so the whole thing you just go downhill. So, all around the world there's people paid a lot of money to keep you in trance, to keep you looking at your phone, to keep you looking at your computer, because in these states of trance, the consciousness can become very malleable, very input can be put in there very easily. So some people, they have maybe a fear of going into trance, and these crazy people who do meditation, or these shamans or stuff like that, they're real crazy people, and it's a whole nother story. But at a certain point, the church really outlawed trance, and because when people are engoddening themselves, connecting with the divine, not through the institution, this is very threatening to the institution. And so, we know about the witch trials, which actually had their height in the 17th century. So when industrialization was really starting to take off, technology, all these kind of things, then the persecution of those people who are going into trance was very much at its height, because this was threatening to the mainstream narrative that the elite wanted to propagate around the world. So often, like Joan of Arc, for example, all around the world, when rationale and logic becomes the pedestal for society, then persecution of the organic trance states starts to happen, and this has happened all around the world. In the UK, in Australia, in New Zealand, there was laws passed against astrology, tarot, all this kind of anything that was outside the doctrine of the church. So we want to choose our trance very carefully. This is the suggestion. Or otherwise, you'll be in a trance but you won't even know about it. And there's very clever people who put you in such a trance that you think you're in control of your own trance and you're in control of your own life, but you're completely just a puppet in the trance induction of consumerism, and you're just going around here and there, and in this malleable state they can sell you so many things, because it takes a pretty heavy trance to keep someone in a job that they don't like for 50 years of their life, to study something, to have a particular worldview that has actually nothing to do with your own free will, has actually nothing to do with your own true nature. This is a very powerful trance, and the majority of the world is in this trance. So where is their free will? It's in the interest of a lot of big business to keep you in a particular kind of trance.
Just sort of a good example, when you go into supermarkets around most of the world, the music that's playing there to keep the consumers and get you to buy more if you're in a trance of consuming more than you.
Yeah, a friend of mine, he worked as a security guard at a mall in New Zealand, and it was confirmed to him that in the parking lot they're playing all their 3.5-minute music, but within that music was subliminal messages to make you buy stuff. This is psych warfare. This is going on all the time. TV, mainstream, radio. When you become sensitive, you can feel that going on. But the ordinary person is thinking, oh yes, I like this, I'm in control of my life, oh, I need to buy another television, that'll make me happy. And the big business is just like, yes, ching ching ching, more money. Pharmaceutical industry, that's another, the medical industry, that's another kind of trance. I won't go into that one too much. So, another kind of trance is memes. I'm not talking about the funny things on social media, but this word memes, it was actually coined in 1967, I believe, by Richard Dawkins, who's actually one of the world leading atheists, but he's actually got something onto it here. So memes, or it's short for memeplex. So a memeplex is a cultural system of behaviors passed from one individual to another, or in a more esoteric understanding, it's like an ethereal consciousness, and that ethereal consciousness lives and feeds off the individual who's embodying it. So for example, a football match, like in the UK, two sides of football teams get together and then afterwards they can have huge riots, so the memeplex of football enters into the consciousness of all the people there, and those who are really great fans, their door is really wide open and they become fully possessed by the memeplex of football, and then because their whole identity becomes subsumed in that, the opposite team is like the enemy. And institutions that have been established for a very long time have a very strong memeplex. So, for example, the Roman Catholic Church, there's a big difference between Christ consciousness and churchianity, the memeplex of the institution. And so sometimes in certain paths, the memeplex of the institution possesses the person, and their spiritual path becomes more about the survival of the memeplex rather than the actual spiritual consciousness that was originated from mystic insight. So when you see the subject of mimiplex, then you'll just see that's going on everywhere too. Like the surfer mimiplex, the businessman mimiplex, the hippie mimiplex, all these kinds. So people are just consumed by all kinds of trances all the time and going around thinking, oh, I'm so free, I'm choosing this and that, but actually we're possessed. So yeah, belief system and ideologies, these are all kinds of trance. Rallies and demonstrations, these are very powerful kinds of trance. Like over COVID, there were so many demonstrations all around the world, and sometimes huge conflict would happen because people in this kind of situation, particularly in riots or when there's two opposing groups and they're trying to hold a line or they're trying to hold a space, then particularly if you're like in the military or the police force, you can feel this very, very strongly. If you're trying to hold one line, then it's not just of that particular location and circumstance, you're actually tapping into the mimiplex of every battle that's ever taken place on Earth. And it's like you can feel into when the Spartans were holding off their opposing armies, the two armies of Kurukshetra, the whole energetic mimiplex consumes the individual, and then they do things that are totally outside of their normal behaviors because they're in a kind of trance. So Hitler's rallies were quite famous for inducing people into all kinds of trance, political rallies, political views, all these things. They're very powerful forms of trance induction. So when we're consumed by these kind of tamasic and rajasic forms of trance, we'll do things that are totally outside of our usual character. Like many Nazis, they were interviewed after the war, and they said it was like I was in some kind of trance. They were doing things that the usual human consciousness would find quite wrong. But because people get possessed, particularly in war and certain kinds of trance, we do all kinds of crap. Or even if you had an argument with your partner or something like that, you get consumed by the mimiplex of anger, and you do and say so many stupid things, right? Maybe you've had that experience once or twice in your life. And then afterwards you think, oh, what was I doing? But you weren't in your normal state of consciousness at that time.
So do you think that's why what causes a lot of PTSD is that people are possessed by an entity such as this, you call it the mimiplex, but you can call it many different things, and they act in a way which isn't aligned with their normal consciousness, and then when they come out of that being leaves them, they can't reconcile what they've done with their own consciousness.
Yeah, that's definitely a factor in it. And as I've also mentioned before, in modern times, pretty much all the wars are for political agendas. And so they're not just wars, they're not trying to defend one's homeland. You're sent off to some foreign country basically to really exploit the resource that they have or gain control over that power. So then that's another level that creates psychological imbalance for those people who have a natural warrior propensity. They can't really express that natural propensity to protect in a sattvic way in this modern Kali Yuga. And so that because they have that propensity, they might want to join the army or the police or something like that. But then that police or that military is basically like a puppet for ruling elite that have their own agenda, and then they send those people off into all kinds of wars for unholistic purposes. Yes.
What is it like when you tap into anger or when you react from out of anger? I always get afraid that I feel like, what am I tapping in? As if that then it is like the boundaries just drop, and what is it then? Like you call it entity or me? Like what is it? You to go out of yourself. I think that was.
I'll pass you the microphone. Do you mind answering it, asking a question?
Yeah, like what is that powerful force that, like, when you step into that meme of that anger, or as if it is something out of, which is not you in that moment? Like, what is it?
In modern society, when the British came to New Zealand, the Māori people, they were the common people on that land. And there's a word in Māori called kaitiaki, and that means we're the caretakers of the land. They did, literally in their language, they didn't have a word for ownership. It was such a foreign concept in that way of consciousness. It was completely foreign to them. So when the English came with their legalese language about mine, possessing, owning, the native people couldn't really get their head around that. And because how can you own something? How can you own Mother Nature? It was here before I came, it'll be here after. So this kind of mentality was very foreign. But unfortunately, that kind of mentality, because our education system is still very much orientated from that level of consciousness, we think, I own so many things. So I also, my emotions, I own it. And so this is kind of twofold here. So I'm not saying just, okay, I got really angry or done something stupid, but it wasn't me, it was the memiplex, so, can't really blame me. There's one side of be accountable for your actions, but also the truth of being in the human experience is a whole array of emotions just move through us all the time. Happiness, joy, sadness, depression, whatever. It moves like the weather. But in the modern Western psychological vernacular, then we're so much thinking about I own, I own, I own. So then when a certain emotional state comes through, we think I own. Or a certain feeling comes through, I own this. Like, and then we create an identity around that feeling that is actually just moving through like the weather. And then because we create an identity with it, that keeps the door open for that energy, that emotion, or that meme, or that entity, that memiplex to keep coming through. So because we're keeping the door open, then a relationship begins to habituate. So there's many drawbacks of the modern Western psychological vernacular, and a lot of it comes around ownership and possession. So on one level, yes, we need to be accountable for our actions and our emotions and that kind of thing, but on another perspective, these things pass through us and we don't actually have any control. So if you look at it in the terms of traditional cultures, they would narrate the pastimes of the gods or great personalities. And these great personalities, they had to go through so many trials in their life, so many hardships, so many ups and downs. And these historical narratives, they would form they would inform and give guidance to societies for many, many generations. But by hearing them, then, particularly if it's a pastime of some personality going through a great trial, like I told the story of Jonah last week from the Bible, who got swallowed by the whale. So by hearing that, also it allows us to process the journey that we're going through. And so by hearing these higher narratives, then they're multi-dimensional. And so this was traditional trauma therapy. It was inclusive in hearing the kata of the gods, of the great sages, because by hearing their trials, by hearing their tribulations, it would allow the emotional processing for the individual. But in modern times, everything's mine, everything belongs to me, so therefore I need to go to the psychiatrist, and this thing goes on and on and on. I'm not saying there's anything wrong with that. That can be very, very helpful. But if we look at it through a traditional lens, their approach is actually quite different.
Are then like energies from outside of you, or is programming of that feels almost like an entity that you think the devil itself entering in, or something like that? That it has no boundaries. Like if you would allow it, I don't allow it, but then you feel like, whoa, if you would allow this totally, I don't know what happen. That's why people can kill and can. But what is this entity or programming, this dark force which is in the world, like acting, right?
Everything's a person. In all traditional cultures around the world, the water is a person, the river, the ocean, the sun, the wind, the fire, all the elementals, they are personalities. They are actually personified beings. And when our vision adjusts, we can be in relationship with them. And then there's higher beings above them. So everything is a person. Anger is also a person. Sadness is also a person. Paprika is a person. Sugar is a person. Everything is a person. So there's beings on all kinds of levels of reality. And some beings have good intentions, and some beings have not so good intention. And so gave a class on the gunas last week about 3 energies, right? And we want to increase sattva. So in this case, if there's a bucket of water and you leave that bucket for a long time in the sun, then it starts to go green, it starts to go acidic, and then the mosquitoes come, they lay their larvae, and then the mosquitoes are coming. Yeah, this happens, right? So this is like the tamas. So in the natural state, our chitta, the screen of our consciousness, is like pure water. But when it becomes stagnant through bad lifestyle, bad habits, bad trance, then that water starts to turn. And in that acidic water, all kinds of unhelpful beings can exist. And they want to keep you in that acidic state because that's the medium upon which they live. So by becoming sattvic, you are alkalinizing your entire being. And then in that alkalinized state, those acidic entities, they cannot exist. So we want to not just become sattvic, we want to follow a lifestyle that's nirguna, that's beyond the gunas. So therefore no beings on whatever level in the gunas can live within your field in that state. So there's so many implications of this transcendental process.
So there is not like, if you are not in that state yet, there is not something which you can do from out of tamas or rajas state to protect yourself, and you feel like, okay, I'm dragged in this dirty water because it's a programming which is repeating itself.
Yeah.
What can you do? And I feel that something comes like this.
So there's so many things we can do in small increments in whatever way, all aspects of our life. We can try to reduce the tamas and rajas and try to increase sattva. So food, sleeping, routine, everything that is starting to sattvatize the atmosphere. And then also we can pray or to connect to something nirguna, such as Nrsingadev, to give us protection. Krishna has one form, half man, half lion. One time there was one brahmana, and he had one ashram, but it was a bit dilapidated, it was a bit falling apart. And one form of Vishnu appeared in the tree out the back of the ashram. And he decided, along with the form of Vishnu, I'm going to charge the locals some money to come and have darshan of this form of Vishnu. And so he was still quite a pure soul. He wasn't doing it just for business, but he'd use the money to do up the ashram, and then he'd also feed the community. So he'd open the doors, and all kinds of people could come and have darshan and give just some rupees for darshan. And then one day, one sadhu came into the ashram, And he came out the back by that tree and he sat down and he was doing his japa. He was doing his mantra meditation. And then that being of Vishnu appeared. And then that being of Vishnu started to scream, "Oh, make him stop, make him stop." And that being was rolling on the ground. And then that sadhu was looking at this form of Vishnu. And he was looking at his hands and he was looking at his feet, because the forms of the divine, they have certain insignia in certain places on their hands and feet. Just like someone can read your palm and tell your whole future by the lines on your palm. So he was looking, he was like, this insignia is not quite right. Something a little bit off about this form of Vishnu. So then that Brahmana, he came running out and he said, "Oh, stop it, stop it, stop it, you're hurting my friend." And then the sadhu said, I'm doing nothing, I'm just chanting the names of God. And so that form of Vishnu, he was actually a yaksha. He was like one kind of ghost being. And he had made an arrangement with the Brahmana. "Hey, you need some money for your ashram, so I'm going to dress up as Vishnu, and then you can charge people some rupees, and you can make some money to help fund your ashram." And so nothing too nefarious about that. But because the sadhu was chanting Shuddhanam, the pure names of God, that being couldn't be in that atmosphere, in that field, and that's why he was rolling on the ground. And then shortly afterwards, that yaksha, he left his subtle body and he carried on his journey to the next destination. By hearing the names of God, he became liberated from that pure sadhu. So just by going deep in and having faith in these divine names of God, none of this can touch you. Just like Uparicaravasu, he went down to Patal Lok, the lower planetary systems, after being cursed by the Devatas. And then the Asuras, the demons, they were about to kill him, because earlier in his life he had fought on behalf of the Devatas, and he had won so many battles on behalf of the Devas. And the demons, they had their opportunity finally to kill him. So they surrounded him while he was in Samadhi, and they took their weapons and they were about to chop him. But they couldn't, their hands froze, they couldn't move, because he was in Samadhi on the divine. So this is one form of protection. And also, to really go into Samadhi and have realization of your own soul and know that you are eternal. He who dwells within the body can never be slain, therefore we need not grieve for any living being. If you actually have some realization you're eternal, then where is the fear of death? It'll be, because there is no death actually. The body will die, but the soul is eternal. But on our way to that, we can integrate so many things like mantras to Nishringadev, protection from the Panchatattva, all these kinds of things. There is divine personalities we can pray to for help, as well as sattvatizing our atmosphere, so these beings cannot exist within that environment. Because in Ayurveda there's 4 types of treatment, 4 categories of treatment. And one of those categories is spirit possession. Also in Chinese medicine, this is one category of treatment that must be taken into consideration when you're trying to fix some ailment. So this is very, very common, that a lot of these ailments that people have, it's actually because some being is existing or working through them, and it's creating some disturbance. And the modern lifestyle that we live is very, very acidic on all levels. So all kinds of mosquitoes can live in that atmosphere, you know. Smoking, all these kinds of things. It keeps the door open for certain beings to live. And so in this sense, there's voluntary possession and involuntary possession. Because particularly in India and other countries, people will go to great lengths to be inhabited by a particular being, by a particular devata, to speak through them. But this is in a more sattvic sense. And then sometimes these beings come through involuntarily.
How can I shining, and then something else wants to drag me down, and I feel my muscles cramping.
At the same time.
Yeah.
So you feel uplifted, but also like another being is trying to drag you down at the same time.
And somebody who is a light worker, healer, she has one time removed the entity. There was a horse also helping, a very powerful old horse. I could feel that he was helping, and it comes back again and again. And I'm so open, like.
There's always many ways to look at a particular subject. Tibet's greatest yogi, Milarepa, he done a lot of tapasya, austerity in a cave, and he used to live off nettle, green nettles, and his whole skin turned green actually just from eating nettles. But he got all kinds of siddhis, and he used to fly through the sky, and he used to sit like this, listening to the divine sound, and he could fly through the sky because he had Lagama Siddhi. And one day, some like yakshas appeared in his cave, and they were trying to disturb his meditation so much, and he told them, "I'd just go away." But then they started making more noise and tipping out all his nettle and just making a big commotion. And so from a certain Buddhist perspective, all these beings, they're just personifications of our own mind, of our own samskaras. And these samskaras can come in the terms of thought forms. They can take on forms in the subtle plane. And so if you look at it from one perspective, you've got your soul trying to go up, but then you've got your ego trying to keep you down. And then
Thoughts which created, I know that. When you think of it, you create it.
but it also doesn't exclude that there's also external entities that also have personified forms. So it's quite a vast subject, and I'm not trying to raise fear in anyone here that we've got to watch out for all these beings, because just like in humans, there's good ones and then there's not so good ones. But if we try to alkalinize our atmosphere, gradually over time these things will lose hold. And also you can ask them, what do you want? Like, what do you need? Maybe they just need some simple offering of food or something like that, and the energetic dynamic of that food can then go to create another body for them on a subtle plane, and they can carry on their journey. Because many of these beings, they're stuck on the subtle plane, and they've got no one to act on behalf of them to help them carry on their journey. Like in Hindu culture, the deceased relative, there's such a process that for 13 months that you should make offerings, and the subtle aspect of these offerings goes to build a body for their next destination so they can carry on. But in modern times we don't honor our dead or anything like that, and then that actually has a lot of effect on modern society. A lot of the problems are the unfed dead, unfed ancestors. So yeah, that's kind of another topic. Yeah, so we'll just have a little kirtan here and just think of that sadhu sitting at the tree chanting Shuddhanam, and in that atmosphere no being can create a problem. There was one Buddhist master who used to play a single stringed instrument, and just by hearing the sound of a single stringed instrument over and over and over again, he attained enlightenment. Just by going deep, deep, deep into trance on one repetitive sound. I'm not saying that's a prescription, but because next we'll talk on yogic trance. To really obtain the nirguna trance, we need focus, we need concentration, and we need absorption. And in that concentrated absorption, then on mantra, then we can transcend all of these gunas, and then none of these gunas will affect our consciousness. So that's the level that we really want to come to. So we've mostly spoke about involuntary trance, which wasn't my plan, but anyway. So now I'll speak more about voluntary trance. And so this is more in the terms of samadhi. So in the Yoga Sutras of Patanjali, Patanjali has described 7 levels of samadhi. So the first 2 is Savitaka and Nirvitaka, and that's related to the gross objects of the physical world. And the next 2, Savichar and Nirvichar, they're related to the Tanmantras, or the subtle, so it goes from the most gross to the most subtle. And the next one's Sananda Samadhi, so no longer are you doing Samadhi, concentrated absorption upon an external object out there in material nature. Now in the 5th level of Samadhi, Sananda Samadhi, your object of Samadhi is the senses themselves and how they are connecting with the external material nature. And in this level it's called Sananda, so there's more there's more bliss on this level of realizing how the senses are interacting with their objects than anything that the senses can come in contact with. So there's more bliss in just perceiving how the senses are functioning than anything out there in the world. And in the 6th level, Samita Samadhi, Sasmita, then the consciousness or the chitta itself becomes the object of samadhi. So we're going from the most gross to the most subtle. Also, these 6 categories are called Samprangyata, or samadhi with content. So this Samprangyata samadhi, that can be the content of prakriti, material nature, or it can be the spiritual content, meaning Sarup Shakti, or the spiritual reality. And then that spiritual reality can be perceived from something more indeterminate to something very determinate. So, or in other words, from Brahman, from a formless reality to an actual reality with form, but that form is not made from material nature, it is made of condensed spiritual essence. So just like, again, another Greek history, Plato's cave, and there was a bunch of people living in a cave for a very long time, and there was a fire burning behind them, and all they could see on the wall of the cave was the shadows dancing on the wall of the cave. And they believed that these shadows dancing upon the wall was the actual reality. And then one day someone from outside the cave came in and said, "Oh, you should come with me outside the cave, there's a whole reality." And they were like, no, we're quite happy here. So this analogy, a couple of thousand years old, still so relevant today, because we are all living in a cave of material illusion, and we're very comfortable here. And when the great saints come, or they send their messengers to go and tell us, come out of the cave of illusion, we are like, no, I'm very happy in my cave of illusion. So very few people actually want to come out of illusion. They want to stay in the trance of Maya. So finally, that man convinced just 1 or 2 people to come out of the cave. Practically their whole life they've been in a very dark cave. And then they come out, what's the first thing that they would see? Light. Very powerful light. Actually, you'd be blinded by this light because it's so bright. You've just been in a dark cave your whole life. Your eyes aren't adjusted to that. So when we come out of the cave of material consciousness towards the spiritual reality, so often the first thing we perceive is the great light of Brahman, the great light of spirit. And if we are not under the guidance of someone who can instruct and guide us further to help our vision adjust, we will just stop there and think, oh, the ultimate reality is just light, or some variation of that narrative. But when your vision adjusts outside of the cave of material nature, then you'll see there's a whole spiritual reality, and that is the actual reality. So, there's one verse in the Gita. The day is not like night for the yogi, and the night is like day for the yogi. So, or for the material person. So the material person, they look at the spiritual person and think, oh, they are very much asleep. They should wake up like me. What are they doing sitting around chanting all day? Get a real job. But actually, the common person, we are completely in illusion. And this is the trance. And to come out of the trance and to see the actual reality, that is actually waking up. That is the actual reality. And so many people, they're just going around in a totally conditioned trance, completely asleep. So just due to time, I'm not going to go deep into these different levels of samadhi today. But basically, when the yogi sits down in meditation and focuses on his mantra or his object of meditation, then slowly, he transcends from the gross physical elements and the condensed forms of material illusion, and as his consciousness becomes more subtle due to his power of focus and concentration, he transcends and pierces through these layers of material nature, coming right back to his own self, his soul, and then in this realization, one can, in the pure chitta, the pure mind space, one can also see the reflection of God. And then one awakens from the trance of illusion. So as we transcend through the power of concentration, then on each level of material nature, that will no longer affect the yogi or affect the spiritual practitioner. So whatever lives or exists on that level of material nature, it will have no power over the consciousness of that person. So as we develop the power of samadhi, go deeper and deeper towards our spiritual root, anything that lives on any strata of material nature, it will have no power. Actually, you will have power over that thing. So this is one of the side effects of the power of samadhi and concentration. And so what I've alluded to here is more of like a yogic technique of sitting down, going into samadhi, maybe controlling the breath, having an object of focus. In the Yoga Sutras, Patanjali describes Ishvana Pranidhanva, that the best kind of samadhi is samadhi on Ishvara, on God. And then if you can't do that, he gives a list of so many other things you can do samadhi on to gradually help your power of focus and concentration. But to just sit down all day and not engage with the world, this is maybe not so practical for everyone. So there's another kind of samadhi that Krishna describes in Bhagavad Gita. So the earlier stages of that are like karma yoga, being engaged in the world but giving up attachment to the fruits of the activity. But we want to be under the guidance of the path of bhakti, and in this way we can come into the path of samadhi that allows us to be engaged with so many activities in the world, but to always be on samadhi, on Ishvara, on Krishna, the supreme reality. So to Be in samadhi in such a way that when you're cooking, when you're eating, when you're taking care of your family, when you're going to work, you are in an unbroken samadhi on God. This is the wonderful path of bhakti yoga. To see everything in relation to Krishna. Everything is an offering to Krishna. Then you are in a continuous stream of samadhi, even if you're swimming, even if you're eating the food, even if you're doing this and that. Unbroken samadhi. Because just sitting alone in a cave, most people cannot do that. They'll miss their phone too much. So even when you're on your phone, then you can be reading something about Krishna, something from Gurudev. So even that is bhakti. A semblance of bhakti. So in this way, the path of bhakti, it teaches us how to cultivate a samadhi with variety, because our life is full of variety, but how to see all of that variety in relation to Krishna, and how to engage all of that variety in relation to Krishna. This is the supreme samadhi, and it's very practical. So it may appear similar, the samadhi of the yogi of Patanjali and the bhakti samadhi, but actually even the samadhi of Patanjali, you can't get beyond the gunas without bhakti. So bhakti is essential. No matter what path you take, you have to come in contact with bhakti. So Prabhupada, he's saying here, the real thing, the real samadhi is to control the mind and concentrate it on the form of Vishnu, on the form of God. That is the real thing, that's the real samadhi. So how to befriend our mind and see things in such a way that we can see them in relation to Krishna. Even if we have something going on in our life that we don't like, we can see that that's a means of purification. That's a means of my past karma. And there's some lesson. Krishna is trying to purify me in some way so I can come closer and closer to his lotus feet. So in this way, even challenges, bhakti is all profit, no loss whatsoever. Because even the challenges, still they're of benefit. This is so wonderful about bhakti. So those who are wise, they invest everything in bhakti, and they get the best return. Because you can use this temporary material life and this temporary material body to obtain an eternal result. That is to awaken your true spiritual identity in relation to the supreme reality, Radha and Krishna. So that is the ultimate samadhi. And so that is the best trance to choose. So that's the one that I'm recommending. You can try so many other trances, but you can just see where they lead. And actually, you've been following so many other trances for innumerable lifetimes. So that concludes today. Any thoughts, reflections, questions, complaints? It's a very fascinating topic, this trance subject, actually. And the more you go into it, the more you'll just see it's everywhere, how it shapes reality, how the whole history of humanity is all orientated around trance. And it's everywhere.
We are alone in the world of, yeah. I notice always that people are like,
In the trance of half being half asleep.
yeah, like how to act, to stay true to your true nature when all, like, especially when I go back to Holland, also India, and family and everything, like I notice the conditioning and how to stay out of this group energy without feeling lost and lonely, without yeah, like-hearted or like-minded people also see that there is this illusion, but you cannot convince somebody that they are in an illusion. So how to stay like true to this and And still in connection also with others.
Thank you for this question. It's very practical. Um, so over the coming weeks, because you're going to be here, you'll have a very good opportunity to learn more and more just the simple everyday practices that so many of us are following here. And like for me, whenever I'm traveling around all around the world or any time, I'm always internally, I'm living in the ashram. So whatever, even if it doesn't look like it, externally, inside my head, I'm following the routine as best as I can of being in the ashram. Because being in the ashram is very sattvic. It gives steadiness to the consciousness. So, for example, meditating early in the morning every day, that sets your whole day up to be auspicious, to be on a good platform. So then whatever's happening in the day, if you wake up in the morning and think, oh, I'll do my meditation later, then later never comes, because so much waves of illusion will come. So try to have a good foundation every day when you get up with your spiritual practice. And then whenever you're cooking food, offer that to Krishna. So this also purifies your consciousness. Whatever you're doing, eating, sleeping, going to the beach, going to work, do it as an offering for Krishna. So in this way, you're always connected to Krishna. You'll always be under the shelter of Bhakti Shakti. And you're very fortunate because you have the opportunity to meet Gurudev. And once you meet Gurudev, and if you take shelter of his feet, you'll no longer be a soul, one soul in the material world, here since beginningless time, just trying to make a nice, some stable situation for himself. You will no longer be trying to make a stable situation, a nice stable sandcastle in the dunes of sand, which are always just crumbling, crumbling, crumbling. You'll have some foundation. That foundation is bhakti, because bhakti is eternal. So by engaging in the process of bhakti, you'll have an eternal foundation to always fall back on. So this is something very wonderful, and we can talk more about practical steps that you can take, because Krishna's given just such wonderful instructions in the Gita, depending on our nature and level of consciousness, how we can progress. And going back home can be very challenging. You know, our family, our friends, they have a particular way of life, and they have a particular way of interacting with their children or whatever, on a particular level of trance consciousness, which is very dull. So two important instructions: give up that which is unfavorable, and take up that which is favorable. So, you know, no one can pull you into illusion more than those who are very close to you. So friends and family, very much they can pull you into old habitual habits and ways of relating and being. So sometimes we have to be very mindful, particularly when our spiritual development is like a tender flower bud just piercing through the soil in spring. We have to take great care, because so many goats and wild animals will want to come and eat that. So we have to create a nice fence around that to help nourish that creeper of bhakti to grow. And when that creeper of bhakti is very, very strong, it becomes like a kadamba tree. And whatever's coming, then you won't be so affected. But until we get to that level, we have to take great care. So we have to be very mindful. How much time shall I spend in the association of people who are going to bring me down? And how can I relate to them in a favorable way? And for those who are in a particularly conditioned state of consciousness, that actually is their means of purification, of just being engaged in the 9 to 5 job, being engaged in a particular duty. If they're engaged in a particular duty for their family or something like that, rather than trying to disturb their consciousness of trying to make them wake up, you should just try to be friends with them, because by them slowly doing that, their consciousness will become purified, because there's a level of dharma in that. And if you try and give them too higher instructions, I'll just give it all up and join Bhakti like me, then they'll get very agitated, and this will create more disturbance in your own consciousness.
From when I asked you the question, I started to get tears in my eyes, and I felt love is the answer.
Love's always
Love
the
and
answer.
compassion.
But see, this is very nuanced, because sometimes the best way to love someone is to give you or them space, because trying to make something work out in a family dynamic when you're at very different levels of consciousness and you don't quite maybe have the maturity to know how to interact, the most loving thing you can do is give them some space and just spend enough time where you can keep that friendship and that love, rather than just trying to force something that you're both not ready for.
Yeah, also to have deep compassion and respect. And it is more, especially with my mother, that not going too much deeper, but I'm not raised in a constructive way by her, and she's struggling a lot with herself, my little life, and it drags me down so much. And I just think of her energy, or when I see her, or my whole body goes in almost dissociation. I don't want to feel that energy. So that is more the thing. Like it is not even just talking with each other, but energetically something's unhealthy in that connection.
Yeah,
I'm struggling for years to balance her with all kinds of things, to cleanse myself. So bad.
yeah. So in relationships with friends, or particularly family, parents, all relationships actually, there's definitely an energetic dynamic to it. And generally speaking, most people, they're not trying to be difficult, they're not trying to give harm to others, they're not trying to be problematic. They themselves are in a very contracted state of consciousness. And when we're in that contracted state, we're wounded, we don't know how to act, and we don't know how to reach out for the love that we're actually longing for. So, in that way, you can actually have great compassion, because this person, just like me, is actually trying to link to eternal love, but they have no maybe connection, no idea, and all they know from their condition level of perception is certain behaviors of trying to make themselves happy. So everyone, the whole universe is guided by love, but most of us don't have a clear pathway of actually how to obtain that love. So yeah, we have to be mindful of protecting our energy until we're stronger and mature of knowing how to help people, because um, in our tradition it said that there's 3 levels of enlightenment, you can say, but this applies everywhere. There's 3 levels of awakening, you can say. The first level is you've taken up some nice practice, you're maybe getting some benefit from it, but you don't know how to share that with other people. So that's called kanista madhika. You're feeling something good, but you don't know how to share it. And in this way, when you try to share from that level, you actually make a lot of problems in your relationships. Maybe you've experienced that. So often it's best just to shut your mouth and just try and be friends when you're on that level. But the propensity of people on that level is they have a bit of a savior complex, so it's difficult for them to just shut their mouth. um, the next level is madhyamadika, and this person knows how to give the appropriate medicine for wherever someone's at. And try to seek out the association of someone who's on this level or higher, because then you can learn very good behavior from them and look how they interact with people and how they can be so masterful about giving the appropriate medicine from where someone's at, which can be vastly different from one person to the next. And then the topmost enlightened person, just by being in their presence, you'll have a transformation of heart. They won't even need to say anything. So we should always try to seek out that person, because then we can really progress ourselves very fast.
Both is important, the second one and the third one. I think the second one is needed to make it practical in daily life, or some self-acceptance of the ego, of the
in terms of like the guru situation, the guru, when he's teaching, he actually steps down from that top level to the Madhyamadika to relate and teach the world, because on the top level he's floating in an ocean of Radha Krishna Prem. What Maya, what material world, what suffering, I don't, all I know is Prem. So, but he, out of causeless mercy, he steps down, and he, out of causeless compassion for us conditioned souls, then he's teaching and helping us in so many ways. So, yeah, that's the middle level there. Okay, so I think it's time for prasadam. Maybe one more little kirtan. Someone wants to lead? I'm looking in this direction. Hare Krishna.